Hey everyone, it's Andrew from the Coaster101 podcast, and I've got a question for you. Do you love Coaster101.com and or the Coaster101 podcast so much that you would literally wear your heart on your sleeve for us? We've got an answer for you. Be sure to check out our TeePublic shop at c101.co/tpublic for the latest and greatest in Coaster101 designs, as well as designs inspired by theme park attractions around the United States. Again, that's c101.co/tpublic. Now, enjoy this week's episode. You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I am joined today by one of the very first guests on the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. He happens to actually be a friend of the podcast. He's been on a couple of times before, but join me in welcoming back to the podcast the Vice President of Advancement for Give Kids the World, Stephen Amos. Stephen, how's it going?
It's going really well. We are keeping very busy, and I just completed a very unique experience on the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser.
That's awesome. I've got to ask. I know you attended as part of the previews, and say what you want about those in attendance. We can call them bloggers, we can call them media, we can call them, I believe the term that people who are mad is using is shills, but I don't actually subscribe to that theory for what it's worth. But how did you get invited to a preview of the Galactic Star Cruiser?
I think I was on one of the rare voyages that had no media on it. We were the grand opening was on March 1st, and the weekend before we had a dedicated voyage for Wish children. So the Walt Disney World had partnered with Make-A-Wish and a couple other smaller wish granting organizations for children who specifically asked it for something Star Wars related, and were given this incredible experience to go enjoy Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser before anybody else. So a very exclusive and very personalized experience just for Wish kids only.
Oh, wow. Approximately how many kids, families were on board when you visited or took your voyage rather?
I think the voyage was full. And I think there was 30 or 40 Wish families on there. So it's just it came up not too last minute, but it was very one of those things that, man, if you were a Wish child who asked for something very specific to Star Wars, I think you always go to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and you're blown away by that. And in this experience, you get to do that and then so much more.
Right. Well, I want to start with the beginning. I mean, I've tried to remain as spoiler free on this. I've read a couple of Attractions Magazine had a really good in-depth review and things like that. But let's start at the beginning. It was you and your wife and your two kids, right?
Yeah. So the perspective is through a married couple with a 2 and a 4-year-old. So I think that experience is a little bit different than everybody else. And for us, the arrival window is 1 to 4. And like any parent who plans to get there at 1 with little ones, I think we showed up around 3 o'clock. And with so few families, it's an exclusive experience with only 100 cabins, on board. There's the queuing is never there. It's rare to have queuing with that few guests on board. You pull up and it's, you kind of pull through the Hollywood Studios parking lot. There's some subtle signage there, but nothing too big because the public's not allowed to go walk in. I mean, to the point where I couldn't ask a friend to come visit me in my cabin, one of the nights. It is exclusive to the people who are on that reservation. And you pull up and there's no parking lot for yourself. It is 100% valet experience. You pull out of there and then it is white glove treatment there. I mean, they open the doors, they open the back, they took your suitcases and you just walk in and through the security gate, I assume that's the process. They knew who we were already. They're like, hey, welcome Amos family. And they have all of your magic bands ready for you when you get out of the car. I mean, I don't know if it's overwhelming because it was one of the intro ones, but I assume that level of detail will be maintained. But it was a escort to the check-in point of giving your magic bands, getting acclimated, giving you some data pads. You go through security, and then you are presented with a safety video of what your experience is before you do anything. And it's funny, if you're a Disney file, Mark Daniels is a host of many things for the Walt Disney Company, and he's also your onboard safety person in the pre-show video. And then you're escorted into your elevator, which doubles as you are launching into space to dock with the Star Cruiser. So it's an elevator with screens that makes you feel like you are. You look at the exterior of the building. There's only a couple floors on the building, so the elevator ride that does take a couple minutes. It's probably just parked for a majority of it, but you get that true element that you have gone into space, and then your elevator doors open and you're in the lobby of the Star Cruiser.
I love it. And before we kind of get into the ins and outs of the Star Cruiser experience, are you a big Star Wars fan yourself? I know I saw some pictures on Facebook of you in costume and your son in costume, but what's your level of Star Wars fandom?
It's high. There's people who are much higher than me. There always will be. I mean, I did skip school. I mean, it's not a cool one to brag about because who brags about episode 3? But I did skip school to camp out overnight for episode 3. And, it's funny because my kids are really into Star Wars. They've never seen a movie because they're 2 and 4 years old. And you realize that there's some of the content in there is not meant for them, but man, they've aligned with the brand. I mean, Baby Yoda for them it's kind of sad because my son sees regular Yoda and it's like, that's Baby Yoda, and you're like, I need to correct you. No, you don't understand the differences between the Yodas yet. But for me, it's a high profile. So I walked in with a greater appreciation. My wife, on the other hand, accepts my passion for Star Wars, and as you noted, my son and I had a costume. My wife was not at that level of detail, nor will she ever be at that level of detail.
Okay. I love it. That is hilarious. But these activities on the Star Cruiser, the reviews I've seen, you're in constant motion. Like there's minimal to little downtime. What were some of the activities you experienced while on board your voyage?
Yeah, and similar to you, I didn't know spoilers. I mean, I didn't want to know anything before I got on, and that's rare for I think anybody who's like a big theme park person, because like you're watching like POVs before you go on something. But I walked on board with really. I almost wish I would have done like a little bit more homework to make sure that I wasn't missing out on something, because as I'll share, like everyone has different experiences on board, and you're like, how did you get to that one? And they always say that the storylines are different in how you interact with characters on board, and that is true. There are some scheduled things that everybody gets, and it's at different times just because of capacity. For me, the first thing that I did actually right on board after our safety training was bridge training. So you're on the front of the ship, and it is a room with like 7 different sections, and some of it is you're touching screens and you're looking up, and it's the full 40-foot wall in front of you as if you're looking into space. And you're learning how to shoot asteroids. You're looking at how to dock something. You're looking at the navigation system, and you're all working in tandem. But it's an hour-long training to learn all 7 of the systems. And then there are times throughout the voyage that you can just go play. And if there's no activity happening, if there's no training, you're always just welcome to go walk into the bridge and just explore it. I ended up spending a lot of time there. I only brought my 2-year-old daughter with me, so the instruction for her was, she doesn't even speak English yet, so the excitement level for her was just to push all the buttons and interact. And what I love about that is, there are people who are very into Star Wars, and then there are, and I am too, but then there are little ones, and the appreciation and the overarching theme is the cast member interactions was just incredible. They would identify like, yeah, my daughter Harper's pushing buttons, and then she wouldn't be at her, because she had an assigned station next to me. Like a 2-year-old and me would both be operating a computer system, but I was always just holding my daughter. And a cast member, there's just so many of them on board, would then just come and stand next to us and then play the game with us. And like that, you just think about how crowded the theme parks can get anywhere in the country these days, and getting one-on-one experience with cast members. It was almost to the point where like, there was always an available cast member to talk, and the flip side is they were so eager to want to talk to you, and be part of that storyline. And there were moments where sometimes you're like, you're not allowed to be in this room, and you look at them, you're like, are you being real right now, or are you being in character right now? This is a story you're trying to tell, and they'd be like, it's the storyline. Like I'm not kicking you out of this room. Like they just want me to be so involved with the storyline. And a couple of the things that I did on that first night was lightsaber training. Mm-hmm. And for that, I had no idea what to expect. And it was truly, you had a lightsaber and there were essentially lasers shot from the wall with a guiding light on it, and you had to hit it. And the Imagineers kind of got smart, because then the 2 people behind, it was like you're in lines of 4 people doing consecutive training, and people in spots 2 and 3 directly behind you had shields, and it was like they could also help you. So if you missed the laser, people behind you were also hitting the laser beams behind you. So it was about a half-hour experience there, but very immersive. And the equity cast member on board was just she's storytelling. That's the thing about these cast members. They're storytelling for a 2-year-old and a 70-year-old and everything in between. So there are moments where she, gets all the kids to kneel down and listen to story time, but then is also teaching overarching themes of the Force and clearly, getting that to resonate with the parents in the room too. So I always felt for the cast members because you'd get like a 5-year-old who is really eager to answer every single question. And then the cast member's like, let everybody be involved in the experience kind of thing.
So how was you mentioned the cast members and how they stuck to the story and played their roles. And I know, especially in Galaxy's Edge, they don't say good morning, they say bright suns, and they don't call it a cell phone, they call it a data pad. How were the cast members as a whole, even the ones just, the frontline, what I'll call service cast members, who would typically be hotel staff in this situation, how were they during the voyage?
Incredible. And something that I kind of noticed right away in the voyage was everybody is dressed in costume, even salaried leaders. There is nobody in like business clothes who are there. There is different color hints to the uniform, or there are either costumes that indicate who they are. But it's kind of one of those unique things is like, no, they're all playing the role, which means that they are given the same amount of questions of like, I'm having an issue to, where's the bathroom? For me, like, I didn't know who I was talking to on board, but they were so eager to get involved. I remember trying to get into a room on deck 4, which is near the dining area, and they're like, "What's the password?" And I was like, "I don't even know what that means." And they're like, there were like a bunch of screens across the ship where like you had to then tap your magic band and then solve something that would then give you a code to then access the door. So rather than just like tapping me in, no, they made me get involved. And it was from like the food and beverage standpoint. I mean, like like you couldn't have a plate empty on your table for more than like 10 seconds before somebody came up there. And I think they were all just so excited to have conversations with you that it was like it was never too excessive because I'm a chatty person, but it was just like they staffed it to the point where like you felt like you're getting your value on that level.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the food. How was the food and beverage on board?
If you have to be comfortable being able to experiment with food. There is no cheeseburgers on board. I mean, it's not that level of cuisine out there. It is, I think you might have seen some of my imagery, like blue shrimp, or things are just in different colors. That might be familiar taste, and the presentation is just it's stunning. And you have to, and there's not menus for the adults when you're there. It is the chefs have determined what the meals were for when you get on board, and when you sat down for dinner that night, the 3-course meal is just presented to you, and you eat what you want on there, and then the next course comes out to you. And the lunches and breakfasts were buffet style, so as much as you wanted to eat. And the food, you go to like all these Holiday Inns across the country, and like you how many different breakfast foods can you really invent over and over again? But on Starcruiser, literally everything I went there, with the exception of like Mickey waffles, because I think those are designed for the kids. I didn't know what I was eating until like I like bit into it, and it was just, I don't know. The cuisine and the cast members. I when I put in my little review, those are my top 2 favorite things.
Okay, I love it. This is I'm scrolling through your pictures now. I've got to ask the question. Your son. There's a picture of your son, and we'll put this in our show notes if you're cool with it. He's got a sticky note on him that says, "I'm not Sammy." What's the story behind this?
So that costume he is wearing is a costume that a performer or somebody who works on Starcruiser wears, and that character's name is Sammy on board. So Henry was wearing the exact same uniform, and the cast members are so in story that they would just keep walking up to him and trying to talk to Sammy, the adult male character. And I was so confused in the beginning because like a cast member walked up to my son, like right away we got on board, like, "Are you Sammy?" And like, "No, Henry." And the person's like, "You look like somebody that I know." And then I was like, "Oh, that's a weird interaction." That cast member was trying hard, but they messed up the name. And then in the first performance, it's like Sammy's introduced in the show. I'm like, "Oh God, no!" That cast member was like so good at being a character. And then a cast member, after like 3 times of being confused, Henry, my son, was like getting confused, like, because he's 4 and in preschool and doesn't understand why people are saying the wrong name. So someone made the Post-it note that he wore on his jacket, which was equally as funny of an interaction with the cast members then.
I love it. That is, again, talking about the appealing to everyone from 2 to 70 and everybody in between. I think that is a fantastic interaction. Let's talk a little bit about the cabins aboard the Galactic Star Cruiser. How do they compare to other hotel rooms on Disney property? I've heard them compared kind of to like interior cruise ships in a way. What's going on in the cabins?
Yeah, I mean, the square footage is the same size as a normal studio in a Disney hotel room. So it's not like I think some people might walk in and they say the price point, you'd be getting like a 1-bedroom suite. You're not. And in Disney's defense, I would say you don't spend a lot of time in your stateroom. Like you are, the goal is to never be in there truly. For us, the bedding, the situation worked for us because I got 2 kids and there's 2 bunk beds. So like that actually worked out to be the ideal family that would be sleeping in that room then. And the window that typically for a hotel room would be the exterior window is a view of the outside of space. And you are seeing a Star Destroyer go by your window, or you're navigating through some sort of asteroid field. And, once every 30 minutes, your room goes into hyperspeed. So like the screen makes it look like you're doing that. And, I was laying low, at like 5 after getting back from studios. I was laying in the room and the lights were dark, and it was the first time I'd seen that, and it like scared me to death actually, because when a dark room with the lights going, it's like pulsating white light in the room. I was like, I don't know, it's like the fire alarm is going off in your room. But the theming is, of course, everything in that room. It's funny because there's a monitor in there where you can actually interact with an AI, animatronic on the screen, and you don't understand it because that it's AI until they ask you a question like, "Are you having a good day?" And it's like pause, and you're like, "Yes," and like, "Great." And it's like, "Oh, you are a robot that I can interact with on the screen in my room." Okay, it's like that was I didn't expect that, and but then everything else in the room is the typical amenities that you expect, that your bathroom and your safe and your refrigerator, and there's clever names associated with all of those things, but it's a hotel room in the end.
Okay. And this is a weird question. Like this 2-day experience, with the exception of your time in Hollywood studios, which I'm going to touch on here in a second, you're pretty isolated from the outside world. I mean, the screen on the in the room, does it double as a TV? Can you like watch ESPN or Disney Channel or anything like that?
You can. Okay. There is a TV mounted to the front of the room there. And I was genuinely wondering that too, because it's so themed when it's on the wall that can then interact as a TV. But no, I definitely watched some Doc McStuffins one morning in the room.
Okay.
But you kind of hinted at it though. It was the weird issue that I was having with the ship. So we get on board at 3:00, and I got 2 little ones that associate darkness with nighttime. And when you're in space, there's no sun, so it's always dark in the exterior windows. And around 4 or 5 o'clock, my kids were ready to go to bed, and I was like, "No!" It's like, look at the clock, and my 2-year-old's like, "I don't even read numbers. I don't speak this language." And I was like, "Stay awake." So then my son fell asleep at 5 right before dinner, and at like 7:30 he like woke up, and I was like, "Dude, like it's not even time for bed yet. Like let's get up and do something." So it's just like, that was like that weird, casino feel of like, I've never, you miss the sunlight. There's no clocks. And I found this out after I departed. There is a room on the deck 4 is the lowest you can go while you're on there. There's an acclimation kind of type of room where it is, it's to get you acclimated to the next planet that you're going to. So like the storyline is you go into this room and it prepares you with the weather and the type of planets. So if you were to disembark on the starship to a planet, this is what it would feel like. But that's just their storyline of like, it feels like Florida. So like I only went there at nighttime. I didn't realize that the whole ceiling was glass all the way down. So like in the daytime, you could go in there and see sunlight.
Okay.
So, but it's it wasn't until I got to studios and I was like, I haven't seen sun in 24 hours. And you're like, it's weird to think about not having access to easy sunlight. But I would have if I would have known that room was there.
Yeah. What was the transfer process like? I've heard it's a very well themed box truck, I believe is what I read. But what was the transfer like? Could you tell what was happening or where you were going if you didn't know what was going on?
You don't even know you're in a box truck, of course, because it's like when you're getting on a gangway of an airplane. I just walked into a holding like a beautiful cargo transport vehicle, and there's 12 seats on it, 3 and 3 facing each other in 2 sets there, and there's like Star Wars radio music playing on there, and it's all heavily themed in there. There's no screens running in that one. But it's just a vehicle that makes you feel like you're in a transport. And there's no way possible when you're on there or getting off of it, you can see the exterior of the vehicle from the way it docks to the wall.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's, they have thought of everything with this process, I feel like.
For me, that experience is like, you're not going to relax on this trip. Because, when you think about you only have like 48 hours or less than 48 hours in the experience, like you want to be eating up you're soaking up every minute of this. And, for us, the one thing that I can't really give a good review or even explain that well is the whole data pads. Because, as you interact with these characters, different storylines are being pushed there. And I said that there are structured things that happen where I was told to go to bridge training. I was told to go to lightsaber at a specific time. A couple different times I would just pull up my phone and I would look at my schedule, and all of a sudden it'd be like in 45 minutes, and through a better storyline of how I'll describe it, it'll be like in 45 minutes meet at lightsaber training to help Rey. And you're like, but only 4 families would be invited to that because I must have done something that triggered that storyline. And we showed up one time and it was like, oh yeah, we're in a room with Rey with only 9 other people. Wow. And Rey's talking to us. And and then there are pop-up moments. And I was walking to dinner with my family, and one of the characters comes up to us, just like a Jedi type character, and was like, "Do you have 5 minutes?" And I was like, "Yes." And they're like, "All right, great. We need your help." And there's a whole overarching storyline that you can learn more about. But it was basically we're trying to bring a R2 unit from the deck 4 to deck 6, and it's because Henry was wearing this mechanic costume. So it was like 10 of us, and then like me, him, and another person stayed next to the droid, and then the Jedi placed the other 7 as lookout people across the deck to like make sure that there were no stormtroopers along the way. And then the 3 of us escorted the droid across the deck, went into the elevator, and then brought it up to deck 6. And then Chewbacca was in the lobby when we got up there. So very well scripted moments of interactions. And the best photo I got from that experience was my son next to a random R2 unit. It's out of context when you show a photo, but for him, he was brought into the space that I'd never seen on the ship. It was like a private room where a moment like this can happen. And another one was that we were brought into the bridge because we knew that stormtroopers were going to be on board, and we had to bring a piece of technology to a different location. And so they, if you want to be engaged, you can be nonstop. So that's what I would encourage everybody to do, because the amenities on board are not a ton. It's storytelling, so you have to be willing to be part of the story while you're there.
Okay, so if you're an introvert, this may or may not be the best 2-day hotel experience for you.
I look at it through the lens of my wife. She stayed often with the 2-year-old because oftentimes like the experience, like Henry and I would go walk off together to be part of those moments. And it's funny because like she enjoyed, if there's an introvert in the family, she appreciated and enjoyed watching it unfold. Like she liked the idea of like watching people escort the droid across the ship and then seeing that they had just missed the stormtroopers walk by, of course. So like, you can choose to be part of the story, but she said she got satisfaction just, it was a 2-day stage show, scripted moments. It's unscripted, scripted, I guess I could say, because you never know when the mechanic talks to my son, what he's going to say. Or ask, so those are the things that kind of made the experience really special.
Okay. And, getting off the ship, obviously we've heard about everybody gets an individual lightning lane for Rise of the Resistance and Smuggler's Run, which is a great perk. But what about the kind of some of the perks that are on ship? I've heard that there's unlimited blue and green milk. Is this the case?
Yeah. And going back to Rise and Smugglers, when we got off board, Rise was actually down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer because like that's the big one. And you're allowed to stay on between until 4 o'clock. So from 8 to 4. We strayed from the storyline a little bit because we were in Hollywood Studios and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge butts up with Toy Story Land. So like I started to drift into the other lands. And you do have a free meal credit built into your Magic Band that can get you food anywhere. I mean, they encourage you to go to Docking Bay 7 in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. But
Mm-hmm.
then Rise did reopen at noon. But they had sold all of the Lightning Lane for the day. So there was a huge line even to get through Lightning Lane, even though we were Starcruiser guests. And one of the really cool perks was Starcruiser costumes are like either a dark blue or a bright blue, and they do not mesh with the Galaxy's Edge of like the greens and tans and browns that they all wear there. So when I was walking by the front of Rise, I was like, I am not going to wait in this line. I saw a Star Cruiser costume outside the front, and I was like, are you here for me? And they're like, we are going to help you get on the ride right away. So they took care of all the Star Cruiser guests.
Wow.
And so we were pushed through most of even the pre-show, so we could just get on the ride as fast as possible. And when you're in Hollywood Studios and you're in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, your storyline does there's so many different things you can be doing on your data pad and solving part of the storylines there. So, but on board, it is with the exception of alcohol and merchandise, everything is free on board. Mm-hmm. It's all inclusive. So yes, there is unlimited blue and green milk. And then the thing is I'm glad the thing was only 2 days because you want to experiment at every food item that's available. And the buffet is always open. It just transitions from meal to dinner. And then in the lobby, there's snack service. And then the breakfast time in the bar, it's converted into a coffee shop. So you can there's grab and go. So there is always something to be consuming while you are there. So, and you didn't even ask this question, but I think one of the most unique things about the lobby was there is no check-in desk. There's no registration. There's no hotel feel. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until the last day I was like, where would I have gone if I had to talk to someone at guest services? And then you realize that everybody who's interacting with you in the lobby is actually the front desk team. And the leaders are in the lobby also. And then I handed in my data pads. You didn't need, they gave you 4 iPods to check in the event that you don't have a phone. Mm-hmm. So I handed in, and when I handed in, I saw around the corner, there was one computer. I guess they needed to pull up your reservation, but that was a trip where I guess I never needed to go to the front desk for anything because it's I didn't need to make a dining reservation. I didn't need to help with my fast passes. I didn't really have any complaints. It's I guess there isn't a need to have, and nobody is checking in during your voyage. So they don't need 10 random pods of a front desk there. So it's I don't know, just from a front desk concept, you're oh yeah, you didn't really notice that there isn't one until, you left the place.
How do you know where your room is then?
You are escorted to your room by one of the cast members, actually. So when we got up the elevator and then off there, there was a row of cast members waiting for you. And again, somehow they know your name. And they're like, hello, Amos family. And it's we're going to show you to room 201. And it's okay. It's
cool.
And they give you a tour. They come into the room. And by the time I got into the room, because of the safety video, they had already beat me to the room with the luggage.
Wow. That's impressive. I'm not going to lie. This is, to me, it feels again, just listening to you, it kind of feels like a greatest hits, honestly, of everything Disney's ever done. These themed elevators are the Haunted Mansion elevator or the hydrolators from Living Seas on steroids. And the bridge training is the games that, were in Space Mountain but aren't anymore, or the games that were in Soarin' and things like that. I feel like it's everything that Disney's ever done has kind of been taken to that next level. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, and for me, it's I don't want to. I never lived my life into a critical of oh, this is the pros and cons kind of list. I'm like, I don't know. I subscribed to myself. I was like, I'm an enthusiast of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, I want to celebrate when anybody is doing something innovative, because like they're just pushing the envelope even harder for everybody else. Like continue to try and do something like this. And I mean, of course I can't talk about the price point. But I mean, like, I think people dwell on that, like that one line and continue to say it over and over again. And someone did show this kind of chart of like when you remove certain elements out of the price point, that like if you were staying at like a deluxe hotel at Disney for 2 nights and subtract that out of there, and then 4 one-day tickets for Hollywood Studios, and you remove that from the price, and then all of your meals that are included, everyone's using the wrong sum total number for those types of things. And if you're looking for, because you don't feel like you're at Disney when you get the same level of Disney service on there, but it's like you don't walk outside and see a palm tree. You're immersed in a story, and that cast is running 24 hours. I mean, the bar is open till 2 on board, like their little cantina style place, and then by 6 a.m. they're like serving breakfast. Like they're the staffing of that, and it's not like they can just have random staff at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's like performers are there at 6, and it's not a ship where you never have a queue. You're not like you're going to meet Boba Fett in line. He's not in the storyline for that. It's like people just need to remember that you're living in that moment of the Kylo Ren story of where Galaxy's Edge fits in at Hollywood Studios. So yeah, there wasn't an Ewok walking down the stairs when I was there. It's like, so if you're looking for, Star Wars Day at Sea from Disney Cruise Line, like that's not that experience.
Mm-hmm. Understood. And I again, price is what it is, and I like the way you kind of touched on that. Say, well, subtract the cost of a deluxe hotel room, which is what you're staying in as a deluxe hotel room. Take away the park tickets, take away the meals, things like that, and it really boils down to, an experience. But my question is, again, as a family of 4, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, would you do this experience again? And I'm not. Let's take cost out of it. We're not even going to talk about the cost, but would it take Henry getting older? Would it take? Okay,
that's the thing for us is where I think anybody can have a good experience there. I think when I was starting to look at kids who are really into the storyline, it felt like at ages like 6 and 7, and older were like the ones who were really tied into it. The only problem I ever had with, or Henry had on board, was he believed it all. So like, it's funny because like this whole opening sequence where like, it's like, yeah, we're praising, we're on Starcruiser, you're gonna have a great voyage, and then stormtroopers come in with an Imperial person. Then it's like, and then Henry like cowered in the corner a little bit because I was like, yeah, you're 4 years old. I hope your normal reaction is like when people with guns come on board, you are going to be scared. So like it was a lot of coaching nonstop of like, no, like this isn't real. Because the story was so immersive for him. So those are like the only struggles that we had. It's like no fault of Disney, but it's just, I think a 4-year-old brain, literally believed they believe everything. So they believed for 2 days, he believed that he was on a Star Cruiser. Like he believed he was in space.
Yeah. How did he handle the disembarkation to studios and being like, oh, I'm going to go to Hollywood Studios, presumably where he's been before, Toy Story Land and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway and things like that. But
he flipped the switch right away. He like we get into Galaxy's Edge and like instant perspective, like, oh yeah, I know where I am right now. It's like it's crazy what a 4-year-old can already know theme park mapping. He's like, I got to go this way to get up to Toy Story Land. I got to go. It's like because he's probably been there, I don't know, 10 times in his 4 years. It's like he knows his way around. It's like he knows he wants to go on Toy Story Mania, and he wants to go to Mickey's Mini Runaway Railway, and he's tall enough to do Rise and Smugglers, but those two just still. Have you been on Rise of the Resistance?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that's a scary ride. I mean, it's so well themed that a 4-year-old would believe that. It's like I can't get him on there, and in good faith, I can't trick my child into doing something like that because I need him to like me in the coming years.
That's true. Yeah, you don't want to trick your kids. You don't want them also to get to the point where you wait in this long line and they get to the ride platform and they freak the bleep out.
That happened we were at Universal Orlando and we were trying to get on the little Seuss train. And it was like pulling teeth. And I was like, no, it's like this isn't. It's like some that and like the Cat in the Hat a ride there. It's like beautiful, cute, but for some reason the loading dock is like really dark, and you're like, no, like trust me, like this is not scary. And then you do the Cat in the Hat ride, or you do the Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of a weird, scary ride. You're like, I forgot that some of these rides are dark. And yeah, I took him into Philhar Magic at Magic Kingdom like a year ago. I'm like, no, it's a musical show. And you're like, oh no, there's a scene in the middle of this where like Donald gets like sucked into a tornado, and you're like, yeah, I forgot that Disney does have like scary scenes tucked away into some of their attractions, and just like all of the animated movies in the '90s and the early 2000s, like the scene of Ursula or Jafar, I'm like, oh yeah, that does scare my children.
It's all right. They've got a good dad, a good mom who can take care of them, and will continue to expose them to these moments of classic cinema, and so they're ready.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, any final thoughts on the Galactic Star Cruiser overall experience that you think we missed?
I think I know they're always adjusting. I can say that because I know from some of the previews, like there was, when I say there's no menus, there was a kids menu, which was nice. So like Henry did not have to eat like blue shrimp. And I know in earlier voyages, it was very much like, I think that the Imagineers were probably like, no, that everybody has to be in the storyline, but like my 2-year-old loves a good cheese pizza from, Pizza Fari at Animal Kingdom. If you produce something like that, they're going to eat. And if you don't make that, my kids will sooner starve themselves, like in protest. But I would say, I think the reviews are always going to be one thing. And I think how the character, like with the media specifically, how they interact with a 30-year-old versus how they're going to interact with a 4-year-old or a 9-year-old. And I think it's all dependent on how the kids interact with the cast member and how the cast member interacts with the kids and the other people on board. But, you get to choose your level of immersion. So if you really want to be involved all the way until 2:00 in the morning, you can be.
I love it. I admittedly not the world's biggest Star Wars fan, but in talking to you over the last half hour, might have come around to maybe one day be able to try to afford to stay at the Galactic Star Cruiser. But right now I have like Starcruiser Dreams on like a Pop Century budget. So
I had a someone was sharing an article on social I saw where it's this group or a Facebook group where people are trying to pool their money, like 4 strangers, like basically like a hostel of like, if you will split it 4 ways, we will all be willing to sleep in the same room. It'll cost you like $1,500. Then will you go in with this on me? I promise only to be in the room from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. kind of thing.
It's just like real world Star Wars, and I don't know how I feel about it, but to each their own. And I know some people are going to do whatever it takes to experience this. But
yeah,
Stephen, I really appreciate your time. I'm glad you got to take a Galactic Star Cruiser voyage with your families. Obviously, everything you're doing at Give Kids the World and what Disney was doing for those Wish families is it's an amazing thing that is happening. Obviously, why we're so proud to be kind of associated with Give Kids the World and things like that. But I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on and joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure you're following us on social media. We are at Coaster 101. We also have a website, www.coaster101.com. A lot of great articles, things like that, if you're into the written word as opposed to listening to your content. If you're listening, please also like, rate, review, subscribe, do all those other buzzwords that help other listeners find our show. And thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music. We will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.